Hello, everybody. My name is David Keck, and this is Surviving Abuse Podcast.
I don't understand why it was me. I don't know if I'll ever be the same. Is the same what I want anyway? You took what I thought I could never get back. I quit holding on to the anger. I broke down just to begin again. Won't let you win any longer. I'm back. Taking the good, kissing the bad goodbye. Now I'm back, and I'll pray for you. I'm done hurting. We holding on to the anger. Won't let you win any longer. And we begin again. Now I'm back, and I'll pray for you. I'm done hurting.
I've been inside this church in more than 30 years.
When we look at the windows, you can never think something bad might happen here.
Drama therapy is the intentional use of role play to achieve a therapeutic goal.
We're trying to walk through each other's memories and the things that haunt us the most. Each survivor is writing their own script.
I'm a New York City contractor. I can chew the balls of a union electrician, but I can't talk about what happened to me when I'm 13.
I have so much anger and hatred, I can't even put it into words.
We have over 230 priests that we know of that have been sexually abusive in this area.
Catholic Church says, tell your mother we're sorry. You tell my mother you're sorry because she still believes in you.
In my mind, it's like they're not going to win. And that's how I cope with it.
Do I have concerns? Yes, I have concerns being re-traumatized.
If it's too painful, we shouldn't do it.
I need to conquer these fears.
People do things for other people. Sometimes they don't do for themselves.
So are you okay being here?
Somehow the stage set
Oh my gosh, changed everything.
It's an opportunity to take back the power of those places over us.
Maybe you can run up and try to escape and go there. 1, 2, 3. They turn and look.
Coming down the aisle with these guys is melding me with my 13-year-old self. But I feel like I have a connection to it, so I know how to take care of it. Dude.
You did something that is so hard for me to do. This is a vehicle to help other guys.
I'm here for you.
You chose to live and to love, and in return, you chose to be loved.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Surviving Abuse Podcast. I'm really excited about today. Hello, Kiana.
Hi, David.
So, remember for Season 2, Episode 1, at the end of the show, I gave Kiana a homework assignment and said, hey, you need to email Mike Foreman from the documentary Procession. And she did, and he responded. And I've had multiple conversations with him. Such a cool guy. He is the only guy that I've actually ever really talked sports about. I didn't understand a damn thing about it, but I still loved it. He's just so cool. And he's here with us today. Hi, Mike.
Hey, David.
How are you?
Not bad. What's going on with you?
Oh, not much. We're so looking forward to this. We were really into the documentary. I loved the way this documentary was done. And just so everyone knows, it was Season 2, Episode 1 is where Kiana and I cover our take on this documentary. And so I do recommend listening to that first. And I also want to throw out a disclaimer that we'll do throughout the show too. But there's going to be some trigger warnings because we're going to be talking about some heavy shit.
Very heavy shit. And so just so you know, a lot of this, I mean, it's real stuff that's happened. It's very hot. It's very heavy. But understand that these are the things that are happening in the world. And sometimes you just can't sugarcoat those things. So
Yeah. I mean, it's things that we have to talk about. We've got to have discussions of this. We've got to bring awareness to it. And the more that we know, the more that we can change, hopefully. So, Mike, why don't you tell us first, like, how did the documentary come about? Like, how did you get notified that someone was wanting to do this and you agreed to do it?
Well, if you remember the very beginning of Procession, that press conference,
that
was in August of 2018, and we did that press conference, and then I guess it was then after that I did a couple stories on a local TV station, KCTV5. They're affiliated with CBS. I did a couple news stories, and then my attorney Rebecca Randall, she called me and said that there was a documentary filmmaker that might be interested in talking to us. So we met at Rebecca's office and kind of slowly took shape from there. And we got postponed a year because of COVID. But that's how it all kind of started.
Wow. I just think it was so impactful. I've not really seen a documentary done like this. And what's his name? Robert Greene. It was the director.
Yeah, Robert Greene is just fantastic. What a great human being. God Almighty.
I really liked his spin on this and the way that he did it. I think you listened to the discussion that Kiana and I had about the documentary. And in the beginning, we thought we had picked the wrong thing. We thought we had picked a movie, but then when we realized what was going on, we just fell in love with it.
Oh, absolutely. I felt that it was very well done. The thought of drama for therapy, that just completely floored me. I had never even heard of such a thing. And then one of the things that I will say is throughout the documentary, you in particular kind of touched me. Like, one of the things that I mentioned in our covering of the documentary is that, everyone may have a different opinion of you, of the individuals that were going through the drama therapy, but you had kind of touched me. And I don't think that we ever talked about why you kind of touched me. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there, is that you had a lot to say about the Catholic Church. There was a lot of anger there. And I had actually known people that you kind of reminded me of people that I had came upon in my life. And I had never, ever stopped to think outside of my own bubble, what has maybe some of these people went through. And after seeing the documentary and seeing how this had impacted your life, it completely floored me. It made me stop, like, hey, sometimes you do need to get outside of your own little bubble and understand that people have emotions for a reason. You may think that you may make snap decisions or judgments about people without even knowing what they've been through.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And for me, I'm sure for a hell of a lot of other people, for me, Catholic Church has made this so much worse. It's unbelievable. Absolutely unfucking believable. They're just fucking evil. They just flat out fucking lie and just fucking lie. They have made all of this so much worse for me. And while they're using the statute of limitations against me for an excruciating 3.5 fucking years, while they're doing that, they're lying to the public about healing, mercy, and empathy for all victims. And all of their talk of healing, they don't give a shit about survivors of this fucking crap. All of their talk about healing, that's meant for all Catholics and the general public, just from a public relations standpoint. Because based on their own actions, they don't give a fuck about survivors. This is just so telling. The Catholic Church spends tens of millions of dollars lobbying and fighting like hell to keep the statute of limitations firmly in place. Statute of limitations causes so much more agony mental and emotional distress and just flat out pain and suffering. And they're paying for that while they're preaching and boasting of accountability and transparency from within and throughout the Catholic Church. Hiding behind the statute of limitations is the exact opposite of accountability. And when the next horrific mountain of shit is uncovered about the Catholic Church worldwide will boast of accountability and transparency, and then Catholics will hear that and they'll think, that sounds pretty good. And then they go about their little lives and they don't realize that there's no accountability at all. It's the exact opposite of accountability. It's just sickening. The pedophile the Catholic Church itself is worse than the evil pedophiles because they enable it to continue. They hide, protect, support, and enable child rapists.
So let's back up a little bit, Mike.
It's just fucking despicable. What?
I said, so let's back up a little bit so that people understand where you're coming from with this. So I have heard your story. We have watched the documentary. I've also read your website. Some of the viewers may not understand where you're coming from. Can you share a little bit about your story for everyone to hear so that they'll understand when you're saying the things that you're saying, you're talking basically from firsthand experience?
Unfortunately, yes. I was assaulted when I was in the 6th grade. Then fast forward, I'm just kind of nutshelling this. This is all in my story at IamNotCatholic.com. But I was assaulted when I was in the 6th grade. And after it happened, the priest told me not to tell my parents because my dad might not understand and he might lose his temper and do something that could send him off to jail for a long time. So when this happened in a rental house. That's part of the reason why I'm so pissed off at the church. If this was just my word and that was all I had, I'd still be mad as hell. But I at least I could almost live with it. But see, what kills me every fucking day is the Catholic Church. They know I'm telling the truth. And they just fucking lie. They know I'm telling the truth. So the priest told me not to tell my parents. I'm the only reason, the way I know that they know I'm telling the truth is the only way I could know where that rental house was where this shit happened in 1972 was by being there, because this priest he wasn't even going to our church. He was at the new Good Shepherd Church in Shawnee. The church was so new, they hadn't even built a rectory yet. So they rented a house for this priest and another priest to live. And this is where that happened. And then, after I'm assaulted, I go out, my mom picks me up and I'm telling her what happened before we even got out of the driveway. And I told her what he said about not telling my parents because of what Dad might do. And she agreed. And she actually convinced me not to tell Dad. And I don't give my mother a free pass on any of this shit. I've struggled with this a lot. My mother, and looking back on it, is just so sickening. She was so brainwashed and hoodwinked by the Catholic Church. It was just disgusting, really. She grew up in a very strict Catholic family. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. When the priest called, my mom called the priest to talk about what happened, and the priest told me that everything I told my mom was true. It was just part of his therapy, and that I definitely needed more therapy. And my mom baked this priest a cake and took me back for more therapy. But I am 100% sure in my mind, in my heart, my mom, as stupid as she was, she had no, ill will towards me or any kind of vicious intent. In her mind, she didn't think this. She knew in her mind that priest was God. It's thinking back on that, it's just so fucking disgusting. That if that fucking priest would have told my mother to jump off of a skyscraper, there would have been zero hesitation. Off the edge, she would have went. Just sickening even thinking about that.
So she was
So
a
then
victim in
after
her
this, I
own way
blocked this
too.
out of my mind till I was like 49 years old. But after this happened, I started this little, I don't know, coping mechanism, according to a therapist, of sitting by myself for hours a day, rocking back and forth, preferably in the dark when possible. I did that for decades without having any idea why. It was fucking unbelievable. And so when I finally recovered these memories in 2011, I'm sitting here by myself watching TV, and these memories hit me like a ton of bricks. I paced around in my small kitchen all night until the sun came up, reviewing every square inch of my entire life, every job interview I ever had, any girl I tried to date, everything, my whole life. And suddenly a bunch of crap started to make sense, like this rocking back and forth that I did for hours a day. By the time I was in high school, I was down in my parents' dark basement for hours a day, rocking back and forth when I should have been getting ready to go to college. Oh, fuck. So after about a year of digesting all this crap, I decided that I couldn't live with myself if I didn't come forward and seek what little justice is even possible, compensation from the church. So I found a lawyer in Florida, and he told me that the statute of limitations has passed, and our only hope for any kind of justice is we have to appeal to Archbishop Nauman's sense of what's right and wrong and what's fair. And God, what worthless strategy that was. Archbishop Nauman is an evil fucking snake, and I'm not kidding. And what's really sickening for me is he's got Catholics in Kansas City hoodwinked into looking at him like he's Jesus Christ. And he is the absolute fucking scum of the earth. So he, after my lawyer wrote him a letter seeking compensation, I got a call from this Catholic priest named John Riley. And at the time, this was in 2013, John Riley had the title of Safe Environment Coordinator. And from the first, he called me up to invite me to come in to appear in front of their independent review board. And from the very first time he called me, he lied. This Catholic priest just fucking lying right through his ass.
Well,
He
can
said
I
there's
stop you for
8
a second?
people.
Let me ask you this, because here's my thing. Why even bring in another Catholic priest? So you've got an independent review. It seems to me the right thing to do would have someone who has no affiliation with the Catholic Church at all. I mean, it should be somebody who doesn't have a dog in the fight.
Right. Hence, independent review board. That's how these people, when I say they lie, they just flat out fucking lie. So when John Riley calls me, he invites me to come to the independent review board. He said, Mike, there's 8 people. I'll never forget this, because at the time, this was a lot more stressful. And I at least now I'm kind of used to talking about this shit, At the time, I hadn't talked to anybody about this except my dad. So this was very stressful for me. And he invited me to the independent review board, would be meeting 6 weeks from when he called me. And he said, there's 8 people on the independent review board. And so I said, God damn, man, 8 people? Why does there have to be so many people? This is very stressful. I have to go talk about this in front of 8 people that they're all going to be looking down their nose at me thinking I'm after a quick buck. And he said, Mike, that's just the way it is. There's 8 people on the review board, but it's completely independent of the Catholic Church. The independent review board is only interested in the truth. And that could not have been farther from the truth. So I say, okay, fine. There's 8 people. That's the way it's going to be then. So I'll be at the independent review board on September 18th, 2013. So then he called me 2 more times before that. And the third time he called me, it was the night before I was supposed to go into the independent review board. I was supposed to be in there at 2:00. So John Riley calls me at about 7:30 the evening before and asks me if I can come in at 2:15 instead of 2:00. And I said, sure, I'll come in. And then again, I asked him the same question, why does there have to be so many people on this independent review board? And he gave me the same response again. So I said, okay, I'll be there at 2:15. And then he also said, the chairman of the independent review board is an attorney. And this is how he said this to me. The chairman is an attorney, and he is very, very sharp.
So basically,
said,
trying to intimidate you before you even got there.
I said, yeah. I said, well, good for him. So I know that last call about coming in at 2:15 instead of 2, that was just to try to intimidate me to get in that last jab that the chairman is a very sharp attorney. So I go in there the next day. I'm really stressing. My lawyer told me I should go by myself to make it as casual as possible. So I'm driving up to the archdiocese headquarters. I'm just really stressing. I'm just shaking. And I get in there. I walk at the father. No, I can't say father. The Catholic priest, John Riley, meets me at the front door and leads me into where this independent review board's meeting. So I walk in the room, and there's 4 people sitting at a table. And before I even sat down, I said, I thought there was 8 people on this independent review board. And the lawyer said, just like this, he said, no, it's just the 4 of us. So that told me that there's only 4 people on this review board. There wasn't 8 people, but the other 4 got called away on something else. So the safe environment coordinator, he just fucking lied to me about that for 6 weeks, giving me extra stress. And I sort of got almost stormed out of the right then, but then I did. I thought, no, fuck. These people are going to hear exactly what I have to say. So on the independent review board, there's 1 empty chair at this table. God damn it. So I sat down, and sitting right next to me, about 2 feet away from me on my right next to me, sits a senior Catholic priest in Catholic priest clothing. I mean, how insulting on the independent review board that's totally neutral of the Catholic Church. Here's a senior Catholic fucking priest.
Well, on so many different levels, too, and I'm going to interject a little bit. So not only is, again, you shouldn't have anyone who has any affiliation with the Catholic Church being on your review.
Exactly.
That's the first thing.
Right.
The second thing
that's how these fucking people, that's how blatantly these fucking people lie.
Well, and the other thing is I want to bring up, too, is you're saying that this is supposed to be a safe environment for the person who has been abused. That right there would have been a trigger for me. I mean, I would assume anybody else who had been abused like that. I mean, that would immediately be a trigger. So you're saying this is a safe environment, but then you have a senior Catholic priest sitting there staring me in the eye while I have to tell my story.
Exactly. And the safe environment coordinator, he lied to me to give me extra stress for 6 weeks. So there's the senior Catholic priest. And sitting next to him was a woman. I don't know what she did. I wouldn't be surprised now, knowing how they lie. She was probably a Catholic nun. And then on the other side of the table, facing us, there's a senior professor from Catholic Benedictine College. And next to him sat the Catholic lawyer. That's what the independent review board was made up of. Just all lies. They just fucking lie, and lie. So when I started talking, I said, just to kind of set the tone, see, I think they thought I was going to see this senior Catholic priest, and I was going to bow my head and say, oh, I'm sorry, Father, may we please pray now? No, that's not how that went at all. I said, when I was in the 6th grade, here's how I started my story talking to them. When I was in the 6th grade, everything was great in my life. And then my mother took me out of the public grade school I was going to and put me into the Queen of the Holy Rosary Catholic School at the 2nd semester of 6th grade. Then I paused for a long 5 seconds, and I turned to the priest sitting right next to me, this senior Catholic priest, and in a loud, angry tone, after I said, my mom put me in the Queen of Holy Rosary school, I paused, and right to him I said, fuck, fucking asshole. Ugh. And they just fucking lie. And when I left there was no doubt in my mind they knew I was telling the truth. There's no doubt whatsoever. Because I have these details that match up. I didn't even know this at the time, but I know where that rental house was. The only way I could know where that was by being there, because it was way too far from where the house I grew up for me to have any know him from out raking his leaves or something. The only way I could know is by being at that house. And then my lawyer, I didn't even know this detail till when I got the letter from Nauman denying my credibility. I almost snapped. So I actually called SNAP, Surviving Network of Those Abused by Priests.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked to this guy, and he put me in touch with this local attorney, Rebecca Randalls. So Rebecca filed a lawsuit. She said that my statute, they had changed it and it hadn't ran out. So she filed a lawsuit, and turned out after 3.5 years that I got dismissed. I lost my appeal. But when Rebecca Randalls took my case, like a year after she took my case, she told me that also after I was assaulted by this priest, he laid on the floor. I was 11 years old. And this fucking priest, after he assaulted me, he laid on the floor and curled up in a fetal position after he gave me a pillow shaped like a baseball bat. And he told me to beat him with it because it'll get out my anger. And I'm looking at this grown man in a fetal position on the floor. Well, my lawyer told me that several other victims of the same priest reported the same detail.
Oh, wow.
And Nauman knew that because when my lawyer wrote a letter to Nauman, he knew all about that detail and the fact that I knew where the rental house was. So he knew I was telling the truth when he wrote me this letter denying my credibility. And at the end of the letter...
Was that the first time that you found out that there were other victims?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that this priest had a horrific record. See, this is how scuzzy these fucking people are. The priest was named, he's dead now, his name was Finian Meese. And I mean, he had a record a mile long. The KBI, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, has been investigating the Catholic Church in Kansas. Here in a week, it'll be 3 years. Because the agent that I talked to, he told me that they keep, the more they investigate, the more shit they uncover that they have to continue to investigate. So it's going on 3 years now. And
well, and it sounds like it's going to be a never-ending thing. The way, I mean, if they keep on uncovering, I mean, this could last a very long time.
It's unbelievable. It really is, and it's just people are just the scum of the earth. They really are. So then, when Nauman writes me his letter, he knows I'm telling the truth when he wrote me this letter. And this letter is on my website, IamNotCatholic.com, and I dissect this letter, and it's just beyond despicable. So anyway, if I back up for just a second, so Finian Meese, the priest, he had a horrific record. He was out in western Kansas, and he committed horrible sexual assault. So the independent review board out there told one of his victims out there that it was all her fault, what happened to her. Then they packed up Finian Meese in the middle of the night and sent him down the road to Kansas City to little Mikey Foreman and God knows how many other victims. So my lawyer in Florida also wrote a letter to the Catholics out in western Kansas. It was some weird branch of the Catholic Church called it's either Capuchins or Capuchins, however the fuck they say it. So my lawyer was also seeking compensation from them because they knew all about him and they fucking sent him down the road to Kansas City. So in the letter that Nauman writes me, I got it right here in front of me. He says, towards the end of the letter, he said, this is just so disgusting. Based on my careful review of the extensive report provided to me by the Independent Review Board. Well, let me back up for a second. I already explained how ridiculous the Independent Review Board is. Nauman, when he wrote me this letter, the Archbishop, the arch asshole, he knew that I knew how ridiculous this Independent Review Board is. And in this letter he writes me, in writing, he calls it the Independent Review Board 3 times in writing. There's a Catholic priest, a Catholic professor, and a Catholic lawyer.
Nothing independent about that at all.
So he says, based on my careful review of the extensive report provided me by the Independent Review Board, I agree with their conclusion that we are unable to substantiate your credibility of your claims against Finney and Meese. Well, he knew those details. And see, and that detail that my lawyer told me about the pillow shaped like a ball bat, you know, that's Archbishop Nauman. He's got the whole file on Finney and Meese. He knows 1,000 times more about Finney and Meese than my lawyer does. So there's probably even more. He's probably got more evidence that's proven that I'm telling the truth. So then he says, "This is really horrible. He knows I'm telling the truth. I have forwarded the findings of our Independent Review Board to the Superior of the Capuchin Province of Mid-America, Brother Christopher Propovac, for review and consideration." So what he said right there is, I took the initiative, and I reached out to the Capuchins and lied to them about your credibility. Because he's telling me he told the Capuchins that he could not substantiate my credibility after a full investigation. So not only does he want me to have no justice from his archdiocese, he doesn't want me to have so much as a gallon of gasoline from any responsible party to even get to therapy. He reached out to make sure that I got nothing from any responsible party. And then he says, the province has its own procedures for reviewing claims against members and will review the information I have forwarded to them. The information he forwarded to them is that I have no credibility. And he knows I do have credibility. And then after he tells me this, after he tells me that he reached out and lied to another responsible party about this shit, then the last paragraph is so despicable. And again, this letter I dissect this whole letter on my website, IamNotCatholic.com. The last paragraph, again, he knows I'm telling the truth. He knows he's causing me a great deal of additional agony and suffering and mental and emotional distress, because this is like my whole fucking life we're talking about here. Then at the end, he says, this is just beyond despicable. I do realize that my conclusion is not what you had hoped to receive, but my sincere prayer and hope is that despite this conclusion, you are able, through God's abundant and unfailing grace, to experience healing and peace in your life. Now, the first sentence of that last paragraph is so fucking rotten. He says, I do realize that my conclusion is not what you had hoped to receive. I'd like to be on national TV doing an interview. I'd like to read that and then look up at the camera and say, isn't it nice of Joseph to tell me that he realizes that his conclusion is not what I had hoped to receive? What an arrogant piece of shit. Then he says it's his sincere prayer that I am able, through God's abundant and unfailing grace, to experience healing and peace in my life. So he's clearly lying about his own sincere prayer, as he's knowingly causing me a great deal of additional agony and pain and suffering. He's saying that it's his sincere prayer that I experience healing and peace. He actually interrupted his own lie about his own sincere prayer with the words, through God's abundant and unfailing grace. I mean, that's just so fucking despicable.
Well,
God
and
damn it.
here's my thing too. So like, and I'm looking at the letter right now because I've got your website pulled up. And so he, going back to what you were saying, where he mentions that he sent, the information that from his findings to this, to the Capuchin province of Mid America. He also states that they have their own procedures of reviewing claims. If you're really wanting justice, why not just let them review it however they review it, as opposed to sticking your nose in because you feel like, okay, well, we've reviewed this and these are my findings. Here, let me tell you what you should also find. Why not let them just do their own procedures and review the claim without any additional bias?
Exactly. And on top of that, when he reached out to them, he flat out lied to them. This fucking asshole does not want me to receive a gallon of gasoline to get to my therapy. And while he's doing this, he's preaching healing, mercy, and empathy to the public. I mean, this guy he is such a fucking snake, and he's got everybody in Kansas City looking at him like he's Jesus. It just makes me sick. And then he signs off the letter. He signed. First of all, let me go back. He clearly lied about his own sincere prayer, because after he told me that it's his sincere prayer that I experience healing and peace in my life, after he said that, when he knew I was telling the truth, then he spent several $100,000 in legal fees to use the horribly unjust, cheap ass statute of limitations against me for an excruciating 3.5 years, including my appeal, to deny me my day in court. So he's clearly lying his ass off about his own sincere prayer. And here's the thing about that. Joseph Nauman is not some 23-year-old first-year Catholic priest. This fucking asshole is a senior Catholic archbishop, and he's interrupting his own lie about his own prayer with the words, "through God's abundant and unfailing grace." And then he signs off on the letter. I don't even know what this fucking means, but he signs off after this despicable letter full of filthy lies. He signs off, "Sincerely yours in Jesus, the Lord of life." So the last thing he does in this despicable letter is he urinates all over Jesus Christ. I mean, there's no two ways about it. He pisses all over Jesus Christ. And this Archbishop Nauman, there's no doubt in my mind that fucking piece of shit is an atheist. He's not, but all the shit that he's done, the evilness of that fucking snake, he doesn't give a fuck about meeting his maker at the pearly gates. Fuck, he's laughing his ass off at that nonsense. I mean, clearly by his own actions. And I cringe to think of all the horrible, evil shit that he's done that I don't know about. The guy is he's fucking evil. And people think he's like Jesus. And one of the stories on my website, I think it was the second story I did on KCTV5, the story starts out on the news with part of a video with Archbishop Nauman in this large Catholic church. And they put this video out on Facebook, and it was designed to get people to keep donating money to the Catholic Church. And Archbishop Nauman, this video, this is a prepared video, a prepared statement. And he's standing in this large Catholic church, arch asshole Joseph Nauman is. And the first thing he says on this video is he calls the widespread rape and sodomy of children by Catholic priests clergy misconduct. That's what he calls that. And then the next thing he says about that.
I just want to back up for a second. So misconduct, like that's all he had to say about it was just misconduct?
It's right on that video in my story. It's the second news story towards the end of my story. Yeah, and then the next thing he says is that this has deeply saddened him because it has wounded the church. There's no concern about all the millions of victims, all the children. He's concerned because it has wounded the church.
Right.
And then later in the same video, the guy is a fucking snake. In the same video, later on, he's talking about Jesus Christ, and he's talking about Jesus Christ, and he says, he never promised a sinless church. That's that's his explanation, and his response to this horrible shit is Jesus never promised a sinless church. Oh my God. And what I would like to ask people, I'd love to ask this on national TV. I wonder how many people would call the rape of their child by a Catholic priest clergy misconduct. And I'd like to know how many grandparents would call the rape of their grandchild by a Catholic priest clergy misconduct. Which always leads me to this in my thoughts. Yeah, I've never been in jail or prison, but I've watched some lockup shows, and in maximum security penitentiaries, those maximum security inmates, the worst of the worst, in society, they fucking hate pedophiles with a passion. Yep. And with damn good reason. You're better off going into prison as a snitch than a pedophile. They fucking hate pedophiles. So we know for a fact, the Catholic Church hides, protects, supports, and enables child rapists. And not just here or there, in every city across the United States and all over the world. That is not up for dispute. That is a fact. And we know that these inmates despise pedophiles. So when it comes to this horrible subject, maximum security inmates are on a much higher moral ground than the Catholic Church. I mean, I don't see how anyone could possibly dispute that.
Well, and here's the thing. I still don't this. Okay, so let's take this back to Archbishop, whatever his name is, Naumann. So he's on video saying that calling rape misconduct of clergy. And his explanation is Jesus says that there would not be, he never said that there would be a sinless church. And here's the thing. I have a problem with this, not because people are not perfect. We understand that people are not perfect. But just because Jesus didn't say that we would have a sinless church doesn't mitigate the responsibility that needs to be taken for individuals who are raping and abusing children. That doesn't mitigate, just because he never said that it would be a sinless church or a sinless organization or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't mitigate the fact that these horrible things are happening. And for that to be downplayed.
It's unbelievable. And if you have a minute sometime, you go to that and watch him say that. In his tone, he thinks he's got a really good point. And before he said it, he says, and I even hate the way the guy talks. I fucking hate him so fucking bad. He says, Jesus promised to be with the church fundamentally, to prevent fundamental error. And then just like this, he goes, but he never promised a sinless church. That's a legitimate explanation for this shit. And when he calls it misconduct, I think I say in my story, it took me over a year to write that story just because I would get so fucking pissed writing that. Sometimes I couldn't even go in this room where I was writing it for weeks at a time. Well, there's no doubt in my mind, if there is a heaven and a hell, there's a special place in hell for Archbishop Naumann. And when he gets there, I hope he suffers massive, quote unquote, misconduct. Fucking piece of shit.
Well, and here's the thing. God. I'm sure that God knows that there's going to be sin in church, because there's some, but to me, it makes me think of sin such as gluttony or maybe some judgment, right? But raping a child is an action that is taken by a grown person that knows
better than
to do that.
What they're doing, and the fact that there's the look, they know better than to do what they're doing, because or else you wouldn't be hiding it, right? You wouldn't be lying.
Oh, exactly.
Hiding. You wouldn't be doing all of these things, and to just sweep it under the rug in this nonchalant way is what's kind of gotten me dumbfounded, right? Okay, yes, we understand that things are going to happen. We understand that the world is the way that it is not always pretty. But at the end of the day, if something is happening that's that wrong, that is that filthy, that is that corrupt, how can you just nonchalantly be like, oh, well, you know.
I know. And when he calls it misconduct, because, you know, he's trying to minimize this, you know. I mean, if I were to hear clergy misconduct, I would think maybe of a priest, of a Catholic priest, swiping $10 from petty cash to go buy a pack of smokes or something like that.
Yes, right.
Not to do unbelievable, just horrific shit to children.
You know,
after they rape a child, you know what they do? They go say mass and pray to the Lord.
Yeah.
God.
That misconduct verbiage, you know, like it makes me think of when I was in court over, you know, my hate crime. They wanted to say that they wanted to take attempted murder off the table and make it assault. And they said, well, he didn't murder you. And I was like, but that's what the word attempted means. Like he tried. Just because he didn't succeed in it, he tried. And they kept trying to bully me and intimidate me into changing what the word attempted meant, you know? Like it was just a way of...
It was a way of minimizing.
It, yeah.
And that's the same thing that's happened here, it sounds like. It sounds like in this sermon or whatever that he was preaching, he was minimizing what has actually happened. And, you know, and look, I'm not saying that every priest is bad or whatever the case may be, but we know it has been proven that there are some that are out there. How dare you minimize it? How dare you? Basically, it's almost like you're spitting in some of these, victims' faces by minimizing what's happened to them.
And Mike, one of the most powerful conversations I have had with you that has really stuck with me that we've had off the record is people don't realize that this is going nowhere for the victims. This is something that you have had since you were now in 6th grade and that you will have until the day that you die. This is not going anywhere. And can you talk to us about that a little bit?
Well, yeah. The church, they talk about healing. And I said that earlier, that has nothing to do with survivors or victims. That's just public relations.
Right.
Because, you know, even though I really cannot do this, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to speak for all survivors of sexual assault. There is no healing. There's coping. There's doing the best you can. Mm-hmm. There's living with it the best you can. You can compartmentalize it. You can cope the best you can, but there's no healing. For example, when I was in the 4th grade, I broke my leg playing backyard football. I mean, it sounded like a firecracker. It was loud. It was horrible. Well, my leg has totally healed. It's like it never happened. Well, for survivors of sexual assault, it will never be like it never happened.
That's powerful. And I think people need to understand that, because of the 3 of us who are on this conversation, I have not experienced that. And and of course, getting to know David, he's pretty much, let me know that, hey, these are things that I deal with every day for the rest of my life. Some days I'm fine, other days I'm triggered. And so I think that's important for people to understand. Like, this is not something that just goes away. It's not something where you get to say, hey, well, that happened 20 years ago. You should be over that. No, it doesn't work that way.
Mike, I think I told you about how, I was a part of the victims' compensation. And so, I just had to save my receipts and turn them in for medications, doctor's appointments, anything that had anything to do with my attack financially. And they stopped sending me a check. And so I called the state and I asked them, I said, you all have stopped reimbursing me. Are you not getting it? What's going on? And they said, oh, baby, it's been 5 years. You should be healed by now. And I was like, that's not the way this shit works.
And that right there is just absolutely that's just fucking pitiful.
Yeah.
And what's really disgusting about what you just said, David, is these are the people, these are the authorities that are saying that to you.
Yeah.
The people in charge are telling you, no, it's been 5 years. You're good to go. See you later. What the fuck? Oh, that reminds me, before I forget, this really fucking irks me. I have a lot of triggers. One of my worst triggers is driving by a large Catholic church and the parking lot's full of cars. That just fucking makes me sick. Oh, fuck.
Do you know how many victims, and I doubt we would ever have an exact number, but do you know how many cases have actually been brought to surface about this particular church or priest?
No, but not exactly. But the KBI agent, he's a really a good guy. He was almost like my therapist. I would call him, once or twice a month, even for most of this investigation. Then we kind of lost touch a little bit during the pandemic. But one time I called him up and he said, because I could call him up and start. I mean, I would let loose on him. It was nothing personal, and he knew that. So one time I called him, but he goes, Mike, before you get going, just let me tell you one thing. Oh God, it's just tell you something else. Oh, this is just disgusting for me. The Catholic Church now, in dioceses and archdioceses all over the country, they're releasing what the church calls lists of credibly accused priests. So the Catholic Church is using implied consent that they're trustworthy. Who in the holy fuck is the scuzzy ass Catholic Church to decide what allegations are credible? We know for a fact they lie and lie and lie. And for them to even have the gall to even say, here's a list of credibly accused priests. And that's a fancy way of saying, here's a list of priests, but there's more priests that we're just not going to tell you about those.
Well,
I mean, these people are just absolute scum.
It's a distraction tactic, is what it is, right? So if I keep your attention over here on this list, you're not going to pay attention to all the other things that are going on.
I'd like to also just talk about, just for a minute, about in February of 2020, I had no idea this was going on. I just happened to see the front page of the Kansas City Star. It was a Sunday, and there's a front page article about there's a bill in Topeka to do away with the statute of limitations when it comes to sexual assault of children, especially. And so I read the article, and right there on the front page is the name of the priest that assaulted me. Oh, wow. And they had this hearing in Topeka, and there was like 4 or 5 survivors spoke to lawmakers. A couple of them were victim of priests. One of them was a victim of the same priest that assaulted me. This guy was all over the place. Well, after these 4 or 5 victims spoke, this is all in the newspaper. It's just so disgusting. Then the spokesman for the Catholic Church spoke. His name's Chuck Weber. And see, he spoke last, and of course that's by design. So he can just fucking lie right through his ass, and then, nobody can dispute it because he has the last word. He talks last. Well, the first thing he told lawmakers in Topeka, Kansas, it was the Catholic Church is neutral on this bill to do away with the statute of limitations.
But why would they be?
That is such a blatant fucking lie. It's unbelievable. And based on this, and this is all what I'm going to talk about now. I was going to give a speech to lawmakers in late March of 2020, but it got postponed and/or canceled because of COVID. I'm still hoping to give this speech. And let's see. Oh, he says that they're neutral on this bill to do away with the statute. I want to tell lawmakers that the Catholic Church, they used the statute of limitations against me for 3.5 horrible years. Every day and every night, I just agonized my guts out for my day in court. And every single day of those 3.5 years, Arch filth rat Naumann and the Catholic Church, they knew damn well that God was not on board with their statute of limitations defense. And every day of those 3.5 years, they didn't give a shit what God thought about that. So based on their own actions, not only are they not neutral on that bill to do away with the statute is more important to the church than God based on their own actions.
Well,
it's just unbelievable. And then he tells lawmakers that there was a reason for the statute and there's still a reason for the statute. But then he doesn't say what that is. Then he says, on behalf of the Catholic Church, I would like to tell all victims, we are very, very sorry. Again, we are very, very sorry. So that despicable little piece of shit, Chuck Weber, and the Catholic Church, they're telling lawmakers that they're very sorry while they're lobbying to keep the statute in place. So they're saying how sorry they are while they're trying to ensure a great deal of additional agony and suffering for future generations of victims. That's how filthy these people are.
Well, and if you were really sorry, if you were really caring for these individuals who have been assaulted, who are victims of all these horrific things, you're not going to be neutral on the statutes of limitation, right? You would say, hey, we need to do away with the statutes of limitation. We need to make sure that there goes no stone unturned. Because, okay, so let's say that you are a good Catholic priest, or your whatever your affiliation is. It seems to me you would be like, no, we need to do away with this, because we need to make sure that we root all of these individuals who have this filthy behavior out, period. Because that's the only way you move forward, because it goes back to exactly what you said, right? If we continue to let this happen, then future generations is just going to continue to perpetuate the abuse to in a lot of cases to children.
Well, and here's my thing with it too. So, there's that saying that if you have 10 cops and 2 of them were bad, but 8 of them isn't saying anything, then you have 10 bad cops. If I was in the Catholic Church, especially if I was a priest, and I knew of the stigmas that come with it, and the what word am I looking for? I would not want to be affiliated with, and I would go above and beyond to prove that I'm the good one and to get rid of the bad ones, because I wouldn't want to be associated with that. So when you talk about the church or the Catholic organization as a whole, there are people that might not be bad people, but they're not doing anything to stop the bad people, which is making them bad people.
Right.
Exactly. My take on that is just because a Catholic priest isn't a pedophile, that doesn't mean he's a good Catholic priest.
Right.
Like in the movie, there's this Bishop Bigler in Wyoming, and some people think he's really great. He's on the side of the survivors, and he's disgusted with all this shit. Well, see, for me, first of all, I wouldn't trust him any farther than I could throw him. And number two, how can he be so great if he is dedicating and devoting his entire life to the Catholic Church? He knows how filthy and evil they are. He fucking knows that they're just. And here's what I'd love to say this on national TV. I've fantasized about the movie winning an Oscar, and I could say this in my acceptance speech. What I'm about to say has nothing to do with God or anyone's faith in God. What I'm about to say, I don't see how anyone could possibly dispute these two statements. Number one, the Catholic Church is the largest, oldest, and most evil pedophile ring on earth. You can Google Catholic priest child sexual assault and Catholic Church cover up and then type in any city you want, any fucking city in the entire United States and most all over the world, and tons of shit will come up. And the tons of shit that comes up is just the tip of the iceberg. And the way I know that, I call this an evil perfect storm. It has 4 parts. Number one, sexual assault is the least reported crime of all serious crimes, especially when it happens to children. Number two, these Catholic priest child predators aren't stupid. They don't want to get caught. They are slick, cunning predators. Number three, the Catholic Church, we know for a fact that they hide, protect, support, and enable child rapists. We know this. And number four, the media is very soft on this. I did those 2 stories on Channel 5 here in Kansas City, and I all but begged the reporter if we could just do one more story one more brief story where I could dissect the letter that Archbishop Naumann wrote me. And I got the feeling this reporter, Angie Racono, I got the feeling that's exactly what she wanted to do. But she finally, I was pestering her, and she got a little agitated, and she said, "Listen, Mike, this is not my decision. It is up to my supervisors, and that's as far as they want to take this story." So the supervisors at a local TV channel 5, CBS, they don't want their viewers to know that this letter from Archbishop Naumann, where he covers me up and lies about his own prayer. So of course I have to wonder if they're Catholic. Then the second statement that I don't see how anyone could possibly wait a minute. So those 4 ingredients of that perfect storm, when you put all of that together, all of the mountains of shit that we know about the church is just the tip of the iceberg. For every Catholic priest child predator, I think there could easily be 20 or 30 more that we don't know of for each one. So there could be just hundreds of thousands of child predators, Catholic priests. And then the second thing that I don't think anyone could possibly dispute is Jesus Christ would never donate money to the Catholic Church. Never. I'd love to debate that with the Pope, with the smartest Catholic lawyer, any priest, any Catholic, anybody. Because there's no way in hell Jesus Christ would donate money to this organization. When I was on YouTube looking for your podcast, and I haven't even watched this yet because it's just so disgusting, but I need to watch it just because it gives me more ammunition because I fucking hate the Catholic Church. There's a thing on YouTube where just wrap your mind around this. Catholic nuns have been pressured by the Catholic Church into getting abortions after being raped by Catholic priests. That's their foundation, is no abortions. And they're pressuring their nuns to get abortions. How anybody could seek spiritual wisdom and guidance from this organization of humans is just beyond me. And that's what it is. It's an organization of humans. And people get it all confused with God. It's ridiculous.
Well, and I think that's the thing that, I mean, and I know I had talked to you about this, that my husband is not really, like, he has a problem with organized religion in general. And I think that's where, I mean, and not just, with Catholicism, I mean, with any organized religion he has issue with. And part of it is because you have people, not all organizations, but there are organizations who will prey upon people who are seeking hope, who are, they're downtrodden in their, in their life, or whatever the case may be.
Oh, absolutely.
Through things, and they prey upon them because they know they're looking for something to believe in, and then instead of being genuine and true, they take advantage of that.
And another word you could exchange for prey upon them, is to exploit.
Yes.
Exploit people's faith in God. Archbishop Naumann, he exploits people's faith in Jesus Christ and God to fog up the rape of children. Let me tell you one last little story about Bishop Naumann. My lawyers filed my lawsuit in March of 2014. In 2015, I'm waiting day and night for my day in court. Every minute of the day that's with me. It's horrible. After a year after we filed, we have the church has a dismissal hearing. They try to dismiss it from the statute because of the statute, and the judge refused to dismiss it. So then a few months later, the church, they scheduled a second dismissal hearing. So this meant months and months and months of additional agony for me. So they scheduled a second dismissal hearing. Then on August 12th of 2015, this is what really, really took me to the edge. That's all I can say about that. Is there was an article in the Kansas City Star, and because the movie Spotlight was on the horizon, Archbishop Naumann organized these ridiculous healing services called the Hope Services, which stands for Healing Our Parishes Through Empathy. And this was all in the newspaper. And at the time, Naumann was also the temporary bishop in Kansas City, Missouri, because the Bishop Finn had failed to report graphic child pornography on one of his priest computers. So this shit with the church never ends. That's a whole nother story. But so Bishop Naumann is also in Missouri temporarily, and there's a big article in the paper about the Hope Services, and he's going to lead the first Hope Service himself. Well, in the paper describing the Hope Services, there's also, he wrote a letter to a bunch of victims in Missouri who had all settled their lawsuits. So he used these victims as pawns in this little charade of public relations. And in this letter, and I have a copy of this letter, and it is so fucking despicable. In this letter that he sent victims who had all settled, I won't go through the whole thing, but here's what he says. And this part of it was in the newspaper. It says, this is Archbishop talking to victims who had all already settled. So he's just using them. He says, this was in the newspaper too. I truly regret how deeply this has impacted your life and the lives of your family members and friends, as well as your relationship to the church. When he said that to the public, that was in the newspaper, so that wasn't even meant for the people that got the letter. That's meant for the whole Kansas City area to read that. When he said, I truly regret, at that time, he had been directly and intentionally making the impact in my life a fuck of a lot deeper for, at the time, the last 20 months. So that is such a despicable lie that he regrets how deeply this has impacted their lives. And he starts that filthy lie with the words, I truly. And there is no doubt in my mind whatsoever, the people that got that letter in Missouri, that it all settled, because Missouri, their statute isn't nearly as bad as Kansas. If those victims that he wrote that letter to and used for his public relations, if they would have been assaulted in Kansas, he would have used the statute against them just like he was doing to me. That he's just a complete evil fucking snake. Say, I truly regret. Oh my God. And when he said that, I was home when he led the first Hope service, healing our parishes through empathy, on August 12th of 2015. When he was doing that, I was home agonizing my guts out over my second dismissal hearing that was scheduled for 2 weeks later. I was so desperate, and still am, for my day in court and for what little justice is possible. I totally felt mentally and emotionally like I was out on the wing of an airplane at 30,000 feet, all directly because of Naaman. And when he was leading the Hope service 2 weeks before my second dismissal hearing, he stood in the front of a Catholic church. And all Catholic churches, or the ones that I was in when I was a kid, have a large statue of Jesus Christ nailed to a cross at the front of the church. So arch filth rat Joseph Naaman, dressed in one of his colorful archbishop costumes, stood directly under that large statue of Jesus nailed to a cross, and he fucking lied right through his ass about healing, about mercy and empathy. When he reached out to the Capuchins and lied to them about my credibility. Now he's spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees to deny me my day in court. I was out on that wing of that airplane at 30,000 feet while he's giving the first healing our parishes through empathy service. God damn, I hate that son of a bitch. I mean, he's an evil fucking snake. And another thing about him, that they boast transparency and accountability from within and throughout the church. To my knowledge, arch fuckhead Joseph Naaman, this is totally by design, of course, he will not take or answer a single question about this. He releases these cowardly chicken shit written statements. That way there's no disputing. He can just lie and say whatever he wants. He could say that he lived on Mars last month. And then once he issues a written statement, then that lie has been completed. There will be no disputing or contesting the lies.
Mike, I was wanting to ask you, when you came public with everything and started doing these interviews and the newscastings and even the documentary, how did the public treat you then?
And when we did the two news stories, I got a few, at the end of on the news story, my sign with my websites is on there, and the reporter even read both sides of my sign with my website. And I got, I wasn't really treated. I was just kind of ignored, really. I got maybe, 7 or 8 supportive emails back then, and then that was about it. And then, when the movie happened, I couldn't believe it, man. We went out to Telluride over Labor Day weekend, Telluride Film Festival, and driving out there, I didn't know how this was going to go. You never know. And my biggest concern driving to Telluride is what I'm going to be feeling driving home. I mean, for all I knew, we could get booed out of the theater. So it first played on Friday night in Telluride, and at the end of my independent review board scene in the meeting, the theater applauded very loudly. During the movie, right at the end of my scene, the whole theater applauded. And then at the end of the movie, me and the other 5 survivors in the movie and the director, Robert Greene, we went up to the front. We stood up at the front of the theater and received a loud standing ovation. It was unbelievable. Then we went to a bar and we started seeing these reviews coming out, and it was incredible. Then we went to New York and got a very loud ovation in New York, and had a big Q&A and a cocktail. It was really awesome.
Yeah,
so what I'm trying to do now is I will never give up, and I can't stress this enough. I want the only partial justice possible, and that is a large check at the expense of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
And if I won $1 billion lottery tonight, I would still be just as desperate and hungry for those fucking assholes to pay. And the more they don't want to pay, the more that I desperately need them to pay. And if I did win that $1 billion lottery tonight, I'd be just as hungry for them to pay me. I would also blanket the entire United States with billboards pointing out just exactly how filthy and despicable the Catholic Church really is. And this isn't even opinion. This is a true fact based on their track record and their history. The only way to prevent this shit in the future, it's a very simple equation. Less Catholics, less children being raped. If they want to talk about, no, we got new checks and balances in place. No, fuck you and your checks and balances. They cannot be trusted at all. They can't. And Senior Archbishop calling that the Independent Review Board 3 times in writing. These people cannot be trusted. They fucking lie and lie and lie. So what I'm reduced to now is I'm going to be a squeaky wheel as much as I possibly can. And I want to make and here's another thing. When I went to the Independent Review Board, if they would have said, this was in 2013, if they would have said, Mike, we're going to spend several $100,000 in legal fees defending your lawsuit, but if you want to, instead of paying these despicable, scuzzy-ass lawyers, we would be willing to give you that money. If they would have said that, I would have taken that. I would have been pissed, but I could have moved on the best I can. And, another thing, the Catholic Church's lawyers, I'm sure that they would just say, we're just doing our job. We're doing our job. These Catholic lawyers, the Catholic Church's lawyers are the absolute despicable scum of the earth, just like the Catholic Church. These lawyers of the Catholic Church, you know what they do? They work and fight for childhood sexual assault victims to have a great deal of additional pain and suffering, a great deal, so that they can get lots of money for themselves.
Well, that's exactly
what I was gonna say. The Catholic Church loves that scum. They're in bed with that scum. They pay that scum.
Yeah.
But they never talk about that during the healing services.
Well, and I think they don't talk about that enough in general, like not just in the Catholic Church, but we're talking about victims, like people who rape individuals or abuse or children, even outside of the Catholic Church. The victim normally gets dragged through absolute hell during these proceedings. And nobody likes to talk about that. Nobody likes to talk about how, because the other side's lawyer, they're literally paid to try to make you seem like a liar, like you're not credible, like you're the scum of the earth, when that's not the case.
No, and the Catholic Church has the money to wave in front of these people's faces to get, like these lawyers' faces to make them want to see that dollar sign more than helping a child.
And what really, just pisses me off, the Catholic Church's lawyers, if they were in my shoes, they'd be screaming for their day in court just like I am. There's no doubt about that, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, you and I had talked before about, that check, getting a check from them and what that means to you. And it's because that's how we punish and reward people, right? If you do something good at work, they reward you with a bonus, or if that we get pulled over by the cops and we get hit with a speeding ticket that we've got to pay for, because that's how we punish people. And so, people want to sometimes have bad remarks or comments because someone is saying that they might want to check, but that's how you punish and bring recognition to this kind of situation. And I think that you deserve that check.
Well, and I'm going to, just from a different perspective, and again, this is someone who, is not the receiver or has not been a victim. If you're not going to give me my day in court, then you need to pay me. I'm sorry. This thing happened to me. I'm going to have to live with it for the rest of my life. You need to pay somehow. And if it can't be in court, then you need to pay me some money. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel about it.
I agree, because they cannot put a price on what this organization has taken away from you. For the fact that this has been a part of your everyday life, that it's affected every relationship that you've had, regardless of the status of it, and that it's going nowhere, you can't put a dollar sign on that.
Absolutely.
I know. And back to that letter that Norman wrote those survivors, he said, I truly regret how deeply this has impacted your lives and the lives of your family and friends. Based on his actions, that is such a fucking lie. Oh, that's a fucking lie.
Well, I had a question earlier, and so it's kind of backtracking a little bit, but can you explain to us, you talked about when your mother found out, obviously you told her immediately, she baked a cake, she wanted it to stay hidden from your father. Can we talk about your father's response to this? Like, how did he take that? What was his response to it?
He was just completely blown away. And see, I told him in 2012. I recovered the memories in 2011. Didn't say anything to anybody for about a year. Then I told my dad, and at the time, my mother had dementia, so it was just a bad situation. But my dad, he was blown away. It's just unbelievable.
Oh, wow! So you said this happened.
And before I forget, I just want to put this in before I forget.
Sure.
Talking about the church's lawyers and what you were saying, Kiona, do you remember in my story I talk about that deposition, that one survivor, they put one survivor through?
Mm-hmm.
We want to talk about a graphic warning. This guy was horribly assaulted by several priests. And it was just, it's just disgusting. And in his two depositions, this fucking lawyer for the church, he asked this guy over and over again how these priests would come in his mouth.
Oof.
Repeatedly, over and over, for no reason really. And then it got so bad that this guy, during this deposition, he said, I'm sorry, but I got to go out in the hall and gather my composure, and I got to go out in the hall for a minute. So the guy goes out in the hall after these ridiculous questions. Then he comes back in the room, and that fucking lawyer for the church says, okay, we're going to pick up right where we left off. And the church is paying this lawyer to do this while they're preaching to the public about healing, mercy, and empathy. It's so infuriating. The church is worse than the pedophiles they protect. And when the church, when they've spent tens of millions of dollars lobbying and fighting like hell to keep the statute of limitations firmly in place all over the United States, that also is a recruiting tool to recruit more pedophile priests. They're saying, listen, you guys, we got your back. We're spending tens of millions to keep the statute. That's got to tell you something. We're going to protect you. We're going to hide you. I mean, fuck, man, it's horrible. It's just beyond horrible. And for Archbishop Naumann to say that, that he's doing his healing services when they're doing those kinds of depositions, God damn it.
Well, and I mean, just listening to that and the fact that you would have, the fact that that's even allowed to me is insane. And don't get me wrong, I understand that as a lawmaker and as someone who's in the judicial, that's your profession, that at the end of the day, you want to get to the bottom of the truth. But to have someone who is a victim of abuse, of rape, and to send them through that type of questioning, to me, it just shouldn't even be allowed. Like, that is just so
right. And
bizarre.
they're paying for that. The Catholic Church funds and orchestrates those depositions. And the worst part is, for me, when they're doing that, they're talking about, to the public about the deep sorrow and the empathy, the deep empathy they have for all victims. And one thing I'd also like to say about Archbishop Naumann, when he did those hope services that I explained earlier, that were just ridiculous, I mean, just pitiful. When he did that, I couldn't help but picture, and it was all in the newspaper, I couldn't help but picture and imagine Catholics all over Kansas City thinking and saying this. Sure, it's just terrible, what's happened to these poor victims. It's just awful. But the real moral of this dilemma is just look at the compassion of the church. Look how the church has reached out to these poor victims and to provide them with the healing and the mercy and the empathy that they so very much deserve and need. The compassion of the church. Hello?
We're here. It dings every now and then. I'm sorry.
I mean, isn't that disgusting? That scenario. Catholics are thinking that. They're thinking, look at the compassion of the church as they reach out to these poor victims. It's the exact opposite. If they can, they'll bombard you with those kinds of depositions, and then use the statute of limitations against you, and then tell you to just go suffer quietly. So they're so fucking despicable. And they've got Catholics just so hoodwinked. How anyone could possibly support the Catholic Church it's just unbelievable. It's truly, and I know the reason is because they get brainwashed into that crap when they're 5 years old. When I was 5 years old, here's what I was taught by the Catholic Church, and at the urging of my parents, because they went through it too. When I was 5 years old, I was taught by the Catholic Church, and my mom was totally gung-ho with all this crap. I was taught when I was 5 that Jesus Christ died a horrible, slow, very painful death, nailed to that cross because of and for me. That's what I was told when I was 5. And that if I don't start eating Jesus Christ's body and buy into all this nonsense, then I'm going to burn in a lake of fire forever. And when I was taught this fucking nonsense, I still believed in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, trick-or-treating. And at the time, I thought the old Batman TV show, I thought that was deadly serious. See, that's when they got to teach you all this crap. When you're 5. Isn't that despicable? I think it's child abuse.
Yeah. Yeah, I see what you're saying. And a couple of minutes ago, you made a comment about suffering in silence. And one thing that I admire about you is that you refused to suffer in silence. So I know that we've talked about it a little bit, but tell us about the protesting that you've done and about your website.
The protesting, I have a sign that's in the movie. And one side of the sign, it says, I am not Catholic.com. Please read my story. And the other side, it says, It is an absolute poverty. The statute of limitations is the crown jewel of the Catholic Church. What does God think of that? With my name at the bottom. And I went and stood out in front of a couple of Catholic churches with that sign. And then I started getting this vibe that I was putting myself in danger.
Yeah.
I was thinking some religious nut job might try to shoot me or something, because I was thinking, it would just take one crazy person, some guy that his mother just died and his mother just dearly loved the Catholic Church more than anything. And so in his mind, he's going to defend his mother's honor by coming and killing me.
Well,
So
and you know
for
what I
now,
even
I've
think
stopped
about
doing
that
that, but I
too
still.
is
What?
what I even think about that too is a lot of men, especially men, will not be as vocal about sexual assault as you have. And so I could see those kind of protests pissing off the people that the men that were also victims, afraid of, okay, if this is brought to surface, if this is brought to the forefront of everyone's mind, then my assault is going to be exposed and I'm not ready to face it.
Yeah, that reminds me of here several years ago, that all that shit that happened at Michigan State, with those girl gymnasts.
Yes.
Yeah.
That were assaulted. This one young lady, I think she was, I don't know her name, but I'm pretty sure she made it to the actual Olympics. And she was assaulted, and she said she was at some awards show, or she was on TV speaking at some show, and she said, and I felt like she was talking directly to me. She said, "Never ever let anyone change the way that you tell your story." I really
feel like
took
it's
that to
probably
heart.
Allie Raisman, probably. I think her name is Allie.
Well, I really took that to heart, even though I didn't really need it, because I wasn't. I'll be goddamned if I'm gonna be all polite because I don't want to offend any Catholics. Fuck that noise. Shit, that's just ridiculous.
Well, and I think that's important for victims to hear anyway, regardless of who cares who you offend. This thing happened, and people need to know. And again, I'm learning so much through through my friendship with David, is that suffering in silence doesn't do anything for anyone. It doesn't do anything for the person who actually experienced it. It doesn't do anything for those individuals who might experience abuse in the future. So,
speaking of that, in that video where Nauman calls it clergy misconduct, also in that video, he says, I'm very impressed with the courage of victims to come forward so that others won't suffer as they have. He's causing the suffering.
Yeah.
He's direct. I mean, when he reached out, just the principle of this, he knew I was telling the truth, and he reached out to the Capuchins and told them I have no credibility when he knew I did. And then after that, then he says, I do realize my conclusion is not what you had hoped to receive. The arrogance of this fucking piece of shit. He should be in prison. God damn.
I agree. So what inspired the name to your website? I know that like when Kiana and I kind of covered it, I had made a couple of little giggles about it because I love the name. I mean, it's very straight to the point, but
and it's very easy to remember.
Yeah,
it is very easy to remember because I think I said it like a million times when we were talking about it. I was like, look, it's www.iamnotcatholic.com. I don't remember anything. I remember that.
Yeah.
And my email is iamnotcatholic@hotmail.com.
Well,
did you guys? Did I tell you about this the last time we spoke? That here several months ago they released a report in France that they think there could be over 300,000 victims just in France, just in the last 70 years. 300,000. And, you know, I'd also like to mention one thing. This is in my website, too. There's a link to this. There's a website you can go to called bishopaccountability.org. And you can go to this website and just take in the pure scope of this. And if you do that, remember that all of that that's on that website about this horrible subject, all of that is just not even the tip of the iceberg because of the perfect storm I already talked about. It's unbelievable. Just the sheer scope of this. You know,
Well, when we release
there's no other walk of life that I'm aware of. Like there's not hundreds of thousands of lawyers that rape children, or state troopers, or ball players, or construction workers. Not like there is Catholic priests. And the reason that is because these pedophiles know that the Catholic Church is a great gig if you're a pedophile. You got, you know, a smorgasbord of very respectful and trusting parents. And then you've got the powerful, extremely powerful church backing you and protecting you.
Well,
I mean, that's a perfect gig for a pedophile.
Well, and I also would think that would make it very intimidating for some of the victims to come forward as well. You know, you think about it.
Exactly.
You know, if you've got an organization that is this powerful and you're on the other side of it, I mean, it probably feels almost as if it's impossible, you know, to win a case.
Oh, just the principle of that independent review board, how ridiculous that was. Just open, flat out lying. I mean, they lie so much it's like they don't even know English. You know what the word independent means, Joseph? God damn. He is an absolute snake. And these Catholics in this town, they think he's like Jesus. That just makes me sick. It really does. It fucking makes me sick.
Well, you know, one of the conversations that we had, Mike, that has stood out to me since you and I have, you know, been talking is the story that you shared with us about the guy that went and killed a priest because of what he had done to his father, and how you would love to be sitting in the jury.
Yeah.
And I would like us to talk about that for a minute, because the point of it resonating with me so much is you're not the only victim. Anybody that is in your life is now a victim of this, and that this is prime example. That story is prime example. This boy wanted to go take this pastor out because of what he's done to his father. You know, priest, yes.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, yeah, the priest at the time, he was like 90, and apparently he had assaulted, you know, just tons of children. And that teenager, he killed that priest by ramming a crucifix down his throat.
Oof.
And he was doing it to get revenge because that priest had assaulted his father. Yeah, I'd love to be on that kid's jury.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the mental and emotional distress, not of the father, but of the teenager.
Right.
You know what a horrible place he must have been in mentally to do that to a human being?
Yeah.
I mean, what the hate and the anger and the pain that teenager was going through. And I'm sure the whole time that 90-year-old priest, during his whole pedophilia career, the church was right there hiding him and moving him around and doing all that shit. Oh,
yeah,
man.
It's disgusting. And, you know, what I have found out through my experience, which isn't religious or, you know, Catholic related, but my attackers seemed to be more protected than I was. There were more things in place to protect him, to the point of even when people heard me doing my podcast, they're like, oh, you need to be careful so he doesn't sue you. Fucking
God, isn't that unbelievable?
Yeah.
You know, not to interrupt, but for me, like writing my story and being blatantly honest about the church. I've wondered, if they're going to try to sue me for anything, And here's what I thought. I would love for them to sue me, because here's what I would say: that if I got something like cease, or we're going to cease and desist, or we're going to sue you, here's what I'm going to say to that: great, sue me. We'll finally get my fucking story in a goddamn courtroom where it belongs. And you're going to sue me for some kind of slander or something? What, you want my Alice Cooper records? You can have them. Fucking asshole.
You know what, Mike? I
would love that. I'd beg all the media to come.
Yeah.
Listen, first thing we're going to do when they sue me is I want to dissect this letter from Naaman for the jury.
Yeah.
Both letters.
Yeah, I had the exact same thought. I thought, you know what? There was so much left unsaid and so much left undone and so much that my attacker got away with. And so, you know what? Let's take every episode of my podcast where I mention something about him and let's play it in the courts. Let's let it be public. Let's bring attention to it.
Exactly.
That was exactly the thoughts I had, where I was like, you know what? If anything, that just motivates me even more, because this could be a way I'm going after the son of a bitch,
Exactly. And for me, I mean, I couldn't live with myself if I was trying to be extra careful that I don't say anything bad about the church, because they might sue me. So I have to be careful what I say, and the church can go out there and lie and just lie and lie and lie and fucking lie. And I'm walking the tight and narrow, the tightrope. I got to be very truthful about every syllable I say. Fuck that shit. I'm telling the goddamn truth. I don't give a fuck who doesn't like it.
Yep, he didn't worry about me suing him when he was sticking foreign objects inside my body unwelcomely. He didn't think about anything then. He didn't think about what it was doing to me. So why the fuck am I going to think about him now?
I know. Exactly. Yeah. That if you did start thinking about him, David, that as you probably are well aware, that would be a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Before you know it, you'd be over there mowing his lawn.
You're right. So, Mike, before we bring this to an end, what is there anything that we missed that you would like to point out?
I'm sure as soon as I hang up, I'll think of tons of stuff.
Well, and the door's never going to be closed. If you come across more and do more, we want to know about it. We're gonna post all the links that you have, all your website links and everything that we mentioned into our blogs and stuff, where people can find you once we do release this. And
a link to my website.
Yes. www.iamnotcatholic.com.
Yeah.
So people can read your story. I mean, people need to know.
Yeah, and
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and because I feel like we will have you back on, because I feel like this is going to be one of the topics that we're releasing, that people are going to have some feedback on or some questions on, and as those come in, I would love to have you back on to ask those questions and to help fill in the blank. We can't thank you enough. I love the relationship. I've learned so much from you already, and a lot about sports.
You and the sports are killing me. How is it that I know more about sports than you do?
But no,
well, I hate to tell you guys this, but the Bengals are playing the Titans in the playoffs today. The Titans have the number one seed. So for the Chiefs here in Kansas City, all the Chiefs fans, we're playing the Buffalo Bills tomorrow night. Well, everyone in Buffalo and everyone in Kansas City is really rooting like hell for the Bengals to beat the Titans, because if that happens,
they don't want none.
Because if that happened, if the Bengals win today, then tomorrow night's game between the Chiefs and the Bills, whoever wins that game would host the championship game.
Oh, wow.
But if the Titans win today, then the Titans will host the championship game. So everybody in Buffalo and Kansas City are desperately hoping for the Titans to lose.
Well, look, this little Tennessee gal is saying it's not going to happen. Titans are winning this game.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I said this little Tennessee gal is saying that the Titans are going to win this game.
Titans schmitens. You follow the Titans at all?
No, not really. I've never
Well,
really
they have
been I haven't been a Titans. I will tell you, the most I ever followed the Titans was when Steve McNair was still alive and quarterback.
Wasn't that incredible what happened to him?
I know. So sad.
Well, now the Titans, they have this running back named Derrick Henry. Do you know who he is? He's huge.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody in the NFL is huge, but the running back, he looks like he's playing against children. Yeah, I would love to do any kind of a follow-up podcast with you guys, and I'll just wait till you'll just send me a copy of what we're going to air so I can listen to it before you do air it. You can just send that to my email.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it went really, really well. There's not even going to have to be a lot of editing, I don't think. I didn't think there would be anyways, just because you're so passionate about all this, and we can't thank you enough.
One of the things I just can't stress enough is, for me, the church itself is even more evil and despicable than the pedophiles they protect.
Right.
Oh, and one last thing I was going to tell you guys. I keep going back and forth. I think I'm going to do this. I'm afraid somebody might try to kill me, though. Is I'm going to get some yard signs and put one up by the diocese headquarters and some around Catholic churches. And it's just going to say, Jesus Christ would never donate money to the Catholic Church. And then a space, and then IamNotCatholic.com. Please read my story. I'm hoping that'll really strike a nerve with the church, because, the church likes money even more than God based on their own actions.
Yeah.
And if Catholics would take that to heart, I mean, aren't you Catholic to have a relationship with God and Jesus Christ? Well, how could you possibly dispute Jesus would never donate to the church? How can you dispute that? So if you're donating to the church, you're going against what Jesus Christ would do.
Well, and
I don't see how anyone could possibly dispute that.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
And if somebody says, "Well, yeah, but Mike, Jesus would donate because the Catholic Charities and the Catholic does such good work all around the world for charities," I would say, no, he wouldn't. He would find a charity that does not support, enable, hide, and protect child rapists. And I mean, I'd like to ask Archbishop Naumann, when he fogs up the rape of children by saying Jesus never promised a sinless church, Joseph, if you do go to the pearly gates and Jesus is standing there, what are you going to tell him about that comment? You think Jesus is on board with you telling people that he never promised a sinless church? That's your explanation for the horrible rape and sodomy of children? What do you think Jesus is going to have to say about that, Joseph?
Yeah.
And then, of course, he won't answer.
Well, there wouldn't be anything to answer. But I will say this, and I've never really understood this, and I've tried to get my husband to explain to me, because I told you that my husband used to be grew up, when he was growing up, he was Catholic. But I never did understand when even donating to the Catholic Church, it doesn't necessarily go to that church. Like, there's a whole lot that just seems very strange to me in the Catholic Church. The fact that,
it is.
Goes directly to, to Italy and things of that nature. Like, to me, like, the Vatican City is one of the richest cities in the world, and it's because, you give your money to support your church, but you're not really supporting your church. You're supporting.
Yeah, the Vatican has its own banking system. Yeah, the Vatican is just pure scum.
So there's a lot that's there that just, it baffles me. I mean, and again, I don't, I've never been Catholic, so I don't know all of it. It's just some of it seems very strange.
Oh, it's ridiculous. It took Bill Maher saying this out loud on Jay Leno or Letterman a long time ago. And I grew up Catholic. This was right under my nose my whole life. But it took hearing this out loud to realize how fucked up this is. Bill Maher said, Jay, you know what these Catholics do at their Mass? They eat the body of Christ. Symbolic shmim shmalik. And, this is one thing I have never been able to get an answer from. When you say they eat the body of Christ, how fucking sick is that? Oh, it's symbolic. Really? What exactly is it symbolic of? I cannot get an answer for that question. You're going to eat the bowl? How fucked up is that? And you might want to, if you haven't, I'd like to remind you to tell your husband to get that movie by Bill Maher. It's called Religulous. It is awesome. It's just him walking around talking to religious leaders and pointing out how completely full of shit they are. Just completely full of shit.
Yeah, I would be interested in checking it out as well.
Oh, you would love it. It's from an entertainment standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, these preachers and priests and pastors, that they are completely 100% full of shit. They're just snake oil salesmen. They really are. So I want to get that sign out there just to know, just to try to strike a nerve with the church, because I think that might be something that might really get their attention. Because based on their own actions, as I laid out in Topeka, the statute of limitations is more important to the church than God. And they're up there with a straight face saying that they're neutral on this bill. And when he said they're neutral on this bill to do away with the statute, he didn't mention the fact that the Catholic Church has spent tens of millions of dollars lobbying and fighting like hell to keep the statute firmly in place. He didn't mention that.
Right.
I mean, goddamn. Ah, shit.
Well, Mike,
I hope we're gonna
do what?
I hope we're gonna do a follow-up.
Oh yeah, no, we definitely will. I feel like this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and I'm very interested in it. And of course, we can't thank you enough. And I know that you had mentioned, the other guys checking it out and stuff too. And if they've ever got anything they want to say and want to contact me, we would love that too. I've learned a lot, and I'm so thankful for you reaching out the way that you have, and of course we'll be in touch. And once I get with my editor and get the details down on when he can have it done, you'll be the first one to hear it, because I want to do right by you.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys reaching out to me. This is good. This has been very therapeutic, if nothing else, for me.
Yeah.
This is great.
Good. Well, Mike,
what I'd like to do is have this similar conversation that we just had. I'm fantasizing about having that with Oprah on prime time on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a big Oprah fan or anything, but she has clout.
Right. The platform she has. Yeah.
I'd love to lay all this out with Oprah, like Harry and Meghan did for 2 hours on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
Yes.
God, I'd fucking love that.
You know what? I think you should write her a letter. Make copies of it and send it to her once a week.
Well, maybe I will do that, because I have heard that, not for the Catholic Church, but she's produced several documentaries about this horrible subject.
Yeah.
Maybe I will try to do
There's
that
a TV
somehow.
show that she's done on mental health, and Kiana and I, it's called
The Me You Can't
The
See.
Me You Can't See. And I think it's like 6 or 7 episodes long, and there's different public figures that are discussing, their trauma and their mental illness. And Kiana and I are going to be covering it on the show. But no, man, I'm serious. I've heard of people taking their stories like this, writing it down, making 100 copies of it, and mailing one to her, each week. And eventually it gets their attention.
So not an email, but a physical letter?
I would do both. I'd write it up in an email, print it out, send the letter, and email it just once a week. Send both. And when you do get in touch with her, don't forget about your friends David and Kiana.
I appreciate that. That never even crossed my mind. For some reason, I had the mindset that I hope she reaches out to me, but I'm going to do that if I can.
And if you decide to do that, you may even mention, just so that she has a starting point, you may mention that you were in, the documentary Procession, so that she has a starting point,
Yeah, I could tell her about Procession, and also my website. She could read my website.
Yeah, you definitely have the tangible resources to provide her. And of course, it'll go to her PR people first, but then they're going to see that and think, well, hell, we've already You know, like, I think it's something you should do.
Right. I mean,
I do too. And
it's at
see,
least worth the try.
I'm surprised I haven't gotten more traction before the movie came out, because I'd like to tell this to Oprah. I have a letter from a senior Catholic archbishop clearly covering me up and lying about his own sincere prayer in writing. God, I'd love to dissect this with you, Oprah.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to try. I'm going to try to find out, what her email and what her mailing address would be.
Right. I mean,
PR
it's at least worth the try. I mean, like David said, a lot of times these things will go to her PR people first before they ever make it to her, but it's at least worth the try. Keep being.
It is, especially, again, I think it's not really, credibility is not the right word, but it gives me some kind of oomph because I have this letter. This is not some choir, some altar boy or a first-year priest, senior Catholic priest. And one last thing, the 10 Commandments, the 8th commandment says that you shall not lie. And the Catholic Church repeatedly, they use the 8th commandment for toilet paper. I mean, they do. There's just no two ways about it.
Yeah. Well,
okay. I appreciate you guys doing this with me, and I'll just wait to get your email, and we'll just kind of go from there.
Yeah, that sounds good, Mike. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk here in a couple of days. I'll be with my editor guy later on this evening, and I'll have some more details. So I'll let you know ASAP.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, sir. You guys take care.
You too, Mike.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow. I'm going to he hung up, and I'm going to keep recording for a minute just for us to do a closing. So I'll edit that part out. But God, it was so cool to have him on and to hear his passion and stuff. Like I want to just take it all away. You can hear the hurt that he's had for a lifetime.
Yes, definitely for a lifetime. I think what people need to understand is that while, yes, there's lots of anger there, that's part of what some victims go through. You have some individuals who are, hurt or they're triggered, and they can't move forward in life. I think even in Procession, I think we mentioned that the lady who was in charge of the drama therapy mentioned that trauma keeps you sticky. It keeps you stuck.
Yeah.
And that's what he's experiencing, right? Every day he is stuck with this traumatic event that happened to him because there is no justice for him. Even if there was justice, it still would never go away. Even if they were to come in, and excuse the expression, if they could undead his attacker, right? Even if he were to be alive and they could arrest him, he would still have to live with the fact that he was abused. For the rest of his life.
And after watching the documentary and having multiple conversations with him, I don't know that he's ever been able to really process the actual sexual assault abuse of it because he's not really had a chance to really be able to process the lies and the turning of the heads. And you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's other parts that really haven't been able to be.
Well, no, because the worst thing that could possibly happen is for somebody to call you a liar.
Not fucking believe you.
For someone not to believe you. Or better yet, they believe you. They know it happened.
Yeah.
But they've convinced everyone else that you're lying.
Right.
That's the worst thing that could possibly, even if you're not a victim, even if you're someone who has, been accused of something that you didn't do, right? The worst thing that could happen is for somebody not to believe you. If that's bad, how bad is it for someone who was actually attacked, who is actually a victim of something that they have experienced that will be on them for the rest of their life, and for somebody to say, "Oh no, we can't substantiate your credibility." I
know. My heart breaks for all of these victims, and in developing this relationship with Mike, and there were several phone conversations that we had, and he was like, "Hey, when we're talking, will you mention parts of your story?" And even before we started recording, he had even mentioned something about it. And there were several times I wanted to butt in and say, I relate. But I couldn't stop hearing him talk. And I didn't want to take that away from him.
No, and nor should it be. I think he mentioned something maybe even after or before the call, where he said that one of the gymnasts who were abused by the gentleman in Michigan, the doctor, she basically said, don't allow anyone to tell you how to tell your story. Mm-hmm. And I think that you have to allow him to tell his story however he wants to tell his story.
Well, and that's why we always give out disclaimers, at this point in the show, everyone knows that there's going to be trigger trigger warnings. But one thing that you and I really hit home with him is we did not want him to be filtered at all.
No, because and as a victim of such a horrible thing, he shouldn't have to be filtered.
No. And what I can say that I respect about this man is he has a lot of anger, and rightfully so, but he knows where to direct it.
Oh yeah,
it's never to the lady or to the man passing down the street.
No.
He has been nothing but respectful to us, and he knows where his anger is directed, and if you were talking to him about sports, that's one thing, but when you're talking to him about a Catholic church,
that's
and justifiably so,
and right, and that's something different, because that is the experience that he has had with the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
I mentioned on the call with him today that part of the reason that he impacted me when I was watching Procession was because I had known people like him my entire life. People who I thought were just, they were just angry to be angry. I never once stopped to think about what has happened to this person. What has this person went through? And it kind of broke my heart when I watched it, because it's like, I've been going through life not, looking at people with understanding, like making snap judgments and not understanding what they have been through. Right. And after getting to know him and understanding what he has went through, it's bad enough that he has experienced the trauma that he's experienced, as a child. Now as an adult, he is constantly being knocked down by individuals in organizations not allowing him to seek whatever kind of justice that he can. He mentions financial at this point because nobody will allow him to have his day in court. Okay, and then you can't be mad at that. You shouldn't be mad at that. Anybody who is mad at somebody who has experienced some kind of trauma, particularly childhood molestation and rape and sodomy, you can go sit down somewhere. You should not be upset that someone who has experienced that, who is not going to receive any kind of justice any other way, is asking to say, hey, well, fine, if I can't get justice this way, then I want you to pay me for the trauma that I experienced.
And Mike, he covers in the documentary. He's a hard worker, and he's made a great life for himself. It's not about the actual check. It's about the representation or what it actually means, the acknowledgement of
that something wrong happened and we're trying to make it right. Even if you don't really make it right, here's at least our attempt to make it right, where he has not had any of that whatsoever.
Well, you kind of backtracking a little bit, but you had mentioned, watching him and thinking, wow, this is teaching me to wonder when people do have aggression to certain things, what has this person's been through, because you've went all your life so far. Well, that would be having that mentality. And it took my attack for that to be brought to the forefront of my mind, and sometimes I can see people acting a certain way because I became very angry at points. And you have even noticed at work sometimes I can be a little snippy, and I can be, easily agitated sometimes. Sometimes there are certain words that people will say that will get me, and immediately I will snap. I reel it in. I've taught myself how to do that. But one of the questions I ask myself, especially in our line of work, when I'm on the phone with someone or dealing with, an upset employee or whatever the case may be, I'm like, okay, who has hurt you? Mm-hmm. Is what I think in my head. Of course, I cannot ask them that, nor would I, but I know that somewhere there is something.
Right.
And it's heartbreaking.
It really, truly is. But I'm glad that we got to talk to Mr.
I'm
Mike.
so glad.
Mr. Mike Foreman, he is a fantastic human being. And going back to what you said, outside of him talking about the Catholic Church, like, he has been an absolute joy to talk to. He is such a fun guy.
Yeah.
Appreciate him immensely for talking to us today.
100%. And if you all have not watched this documentary, I would definitely recommend it. And of course, if you haven't listened to episode 1, definitely listen to episode 1. If you can watch the documentary and listen to the episode, however you want to do it. But as you all heard, Mike would love to come back. And so if you have questions, comments, any of that stuff, please send it to us, because I think this is a very cool conversation to have going. And the fact that Mike says that, this is even part of his therapy. If this is something that we in the universe can give him after what he's been through, then I want to give that to him.
Absolutely. And also just another little shout out to his website. If you guys feel so inclined, www.iamnotcatholic.com, where he goes into great detail about his story. They're also uploaded to that website. You will find the letter that he mentions in the conversation that we have. It is there for you to read. You can, make it big enough that you can read it word for word. It's not one of those things where it's just a blurry copy. Mm-hmm. When he's talking about this letter, he has made sure that anybody and everybody can see what that
He's got the
says.
receipts.
He does.
Everything that he has said, he has posted on his website. He's got the damn receipts. And I hope that he gets some kind of peace and some kind of justice. I have really enjoyed this, Kiana. Thank you for emailing him. You did so good on your homework assignment. So, email Reba, and
you and Reba's gonna be like, who are you? Like, what are you doing?
If Reba is asking who I am, then A, we've almost done our job right. The next part will be when she says, oh, that's just my friend David. So guys, thank you all so much. Please like, share, comment, download, check out our website, do all the things. And if you don't mind, those written reviews on Apple Podcasts really, really, really help. Our numbers are growing, and I want them to keep growing. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, Kiana.
Yes, thank you, David, for having me. I appreciate you.
All right. We will see each other soon.
All right.
I'm back. Taking the good, kissing the bad goodbye. Now I'm back.
Thank you all so much for listening to another episode of Surviving Abuse Podcast. Don't forget to like, share, download, and leave reviews. Please, please, please leave reviews in the comment field. It actually helps us more than you realize. And also don't forget that we are a part of the Patreon now, and any little bit helps. Any donation, even if it's just $1, nothing is too small. We can't thank you guys enough. And don't forget to check out our podcast website for the best landing page to find all the things, which is survivingabuse.com. Thank you guys.